If you're a family caregiver, you already know it's one of the toughest and, let's be honest, most thankless jobs out there. But the biggest headaches aren't about the work itself, are they? They usually come from inside your own family. So let's dive into that really tricky and really important dynamic. Wow, this quote from an anonymous caregiver online, it just kind of says it all, doesn't it? It's that raw frustration of being criticized and second-guessed by the very people who should have your back. If that feels familiar, I want you to know you are so far from being alone in this. And look, this isn't just a feeling. The numbers are pretty stark. A staggering 75% of family caregivers report feeling stressed out. So this isn't some personal failure on your part. It's the reality of being in a systemic pressure cooker. And it's about time we figured out exactly why that is. So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through a clear playbook. First, we'll talk about the massive, often invisible, workload you're carrying. Then we're going to expose the common manipulation tactics that families use. We'll see how it all boils over into conflict, and most importantly, we will build your toolkit for defense and for protecting your future. Okay, so let's start with part 1, making the invisible visible. Your role as a caregiver has immense value, even if our society, and sometimes, your own family, doesn't really treat it that way. Just take a second and let that number sink in. $257 billion. That is the economic value of what people like you are doing for free. What you do isn't just a personal favor. It's a massive pillar holding up our entire healthcare system. Now, here's where we see the human cost behind that number. It's not just about money. We're talking about almost half of caregivers reporting significant physical strain. And then look at this. A massive 2/3, 66%, are dealing with high levels of emotional stress. It's this dual burden that just grinds you down body and soul. And this right here, this is the caregiver's trap. It's just perfectly illustrated. Over 3/4 of you know that therapy would be a huge help, but fewer than 1 in 5 can actually do it. Why? Because there's no time. There's no money, and you can't just leave the person you're caring for alone. It's a profound and deeply unfair support gap. So all this stress and this total lack of support, it creates the perfect breeding ground for some truly toxic behavior. And that brings us to the core of this explainer. We're going to put a name to those frustrating things that make a hard job feel impossible. It's time to open up the family manipulation playbook. Okay, here are 4 classic moves on the board. You've got weaponized incompetence, villainization, strategic ignoring, and assumed availability. Just seeing them laid out like this can be a light bulb moment. It's the first step to seeing them for what they are. Now let's break them down one by one. First up, weaponized incompetence. Oh, this one's a classic. It's the, I'm just so bad with all those pills. Or, I can't figure out that medical equipment. Right. It's a strategic move pretending you can't do something so that 100% of the hard stuff lands right on your plate. And this tactic loves to lean on old, tired assumptions. The sibling who lives 5 minutes away is just expected to do it all. And if that sibling happens to be a woman, well, that expectation gets about 10 times stronger. It's a way of assigning work based on geography and gender, not on what's actually fair. Okay, next up is villainization. And I gotta say, this is one of the most painful ones. This is when family members who are nowhere to be found suddenly pop up on the phone to question how you're spending mom's money or to second-guess a tough call you had to make. They contribute absolutely nothing, except for judgment. And it can escalate to this truly horrifying level. Can you imagine? This caregiver pours 2 years of their life into full-time care, and their reward is getting reported for elder abuse by the parent's own son. It's the ultimate betrayal, turning your incredible sacrifice into a suspected crime. Tactic number 3 is strategic ignoring. This is the vanishing act. It's the family member who basically becomes a ghost the second a parent gets sick. They might literally move across the country, or maybe they just stop answering your calls and texts. They make themselves completely unavailable so they can avoid any and all responsibility. This real-life example just shows how absolutely brutal this can be. The sister didn't just abandon the family, she actually stole money from their sick mother to pay for her escape, all while leaving the other sibling to deal with the emotional and the financial wreckage all alone. Sooner or later, all these dynamics, the avoidance, the resentment, the unfairness, it all boils over. And the flashpoint, the thing that lights the fuse,
is almost always the same: money and inheritance. This is where all those unspoken tensions just explode into an all-out war.
And the whole conflict really comes down to this: a massive divide in perspective. The caregiver looks at a larger share of the inheritance and sees it as fair compensation, reparations, really, for years of lost wages and sacrifice. The non-caregiver looks at the exact same thing and yells, manipulation. The caregiver sees the estate shrinking because, well, care costs a lot of money. The non-caregiver suspects you're stealing. It's a clash between fairness based on labor and fairness based on, well, just being born.
Okay, that was a lot. We've identified the problems, we've put a name to the tactics. So now for the most important part. How do you fight back? Let's start building your defensive toolkit, beginning with communication. These 3 steps right here are your first line of defense. First, stop saying vague things like, I need more help. It's too easy to ignore. Instead, make specific, actionable requests. Can you handle mom's pharmacy pickups this week? That's a yes or no question. Second, document everything, every expense, every phone call. Create a paper trail. And finally, make it formal. Schedule a family meeting. It's a lot harder to blow off a calendar invite than it is to ignore a desperate text message. But let's be realistic. When things get really serious, clear communication might not be enough. You have to protect yourself and your loved one with actual legal and financial armor. This part is absolutely non-negotiable. Here is your checklist. You need power of attorney for both finances and medical decisions. You need a healthcare directive or a living will. And of course, an updated last will and testament. But that last one, a formal caregiver agreement, that is crucial. It's a contract that puts any promises about compensation in writing, turning a vague, we'll take care of you later into a legal reality. And please, please hear this loud and clear. Any verbal promise your parent makes to you means absolutely nothing in a court of law. If they say, don't worry, the house will be yours for taking care of me, that promise is completely unenforceable unless it is in a written, notarized document. You have to get this done now, while your parent is of sound mind, before their capacity can be legally challenged later on. Now, taking all these steps might feel really confrontational, like you're starting a family war. But look at this outcome. By setting clear boundaries, by being specific, this caregiver didn't just get some help, they got understanding. Sometimes forcing that clarity is what finally makes everyone else see the reality of what you've been going through.
So, you've armed yourself. You have your legal documents, you have your communication strategies. But it leaves us with a much bigger and tougher question. Your struggle isn't just an isolated family drama. It's a symptom of a much larger, broken elder care system. Protecting yourself is the essential first step, for sure. But how do we build a society where this kind of defensive playbook isn't so desperately necessary in the first place? That, I think, is the challenge for all of us.